Hi, my name is Alex, and in today's video, I'll be doing a quick walkthrough of where I'm at with the Tetris project I'm working on, and sharing some of the things I've learned over the past few weeks of learning game development. So last time, I had just barely gotten the gameplay working, but I'm now at a stage where I think the game is pretty much complete. As you can see here, I have the main menu where I can navigate to an About page with functioning links, an Options menu with functioning elements, including a delete button for resetting high scores. The audio sliders work as well, and I'll actually adjust things down a little bit for this video. These settings are saved and persisted through different play sessions. A menu for viewing your high scores. These are saved onto the computer and last through sessions. I just save the data as simple JSON, so you can quite easily change the data and give yourself ridiculous scores, but hey, it's single player, so go wild. A very rough how to play menu, and the play button, which sends you to the difficulty selection screen, which I'll crank to the max here to hopefully get a quick game, and then I'll hit start. Here we have the actual gameplay. I'm able to move the block around, rotate it, and place it. Instant place it with spacebar, and even stash it using shift. This allows me to swap the block when convenient. When rows are filled, we pause the game briefly to allow for a little animation to play for the completion of the row, and then resume again after shifting things down. Let's give this a fair go. Okay, and this is the game over screen. I can compare my score with existing ones, and enter my name and submit it to remember this particular score for the future. I can then either play again or quit to the main menu. That pretty much covers this implementation of Tetris from a high level. I'm not going to go into the low-level details of what I did like last time. Instead, let's jump right into some of the things that I've learned over the past few weeks of studying game dev and working on this project. First minor thing is Application.OpenURL. This is a simple command to make Unity open URLs in the user's browser. I use these for the Twitter, GitHub, and YouTube links in the About page. Apparently it doesn't work nicely in WebGL though, so be aware of that. Next, I used what I'm dubbing an AudioManager Pattern. Brackeys covers this in one of his videos, but I changed it a bit by using enum values rather than simple strings. As the name suggests, it's a way to control the sound in your game. The idea is to implement these simple sound objects, which we use to define our sounds. It's marked with serializable, so you can define these in the editor. In my project, I identify the sound by this sound enum. Brackeys uses a string, but I'm a big fan of strict typing, so I try to avoid things like unsafe string matching as much as I can, hence the enum. I have the clip, as well as the sound channel that I want this sound to be a part of. This impacts whether the music or effects slider will impact the volume of the sound. We then have the volume for the sound, and the audio source, which will be instantiated and populated later, hence the hide and inspector tag. This is actually another learning I wanted to highlight. It's useful for when you have public fields you don't want to make visible in the inspector. The other part of this is the audio manager itself. It contains this array of sound objects to be defined in the editor, which, on awake, it will use to set up the game's sounds. I handle music separately. This Tetris implementation doesn't do much in terms of music, so this part of the pattern could probably be improved, but I didn't need to think too much about that. When setting up the sounds, we loop through each one, creating the audio source and assigning all the related fields. We resolve the mixer depending on the defined channel, and do some error handling of if the same sound has been defined multiple times. This is what the audio manager and sounds look like in the editor. I've attached them to a child of the game controller to avoid cluttering up the inspector of the game controller itself with a bunch of audio sources once they're instantiated at play. The sound enum and channel can easily be selected using these dropdowns. This whole pattern makes it quite easy to then invoke sounds from anywhere in the scene, such as here, where we invoke a sound when a block is placed. This also highlights the usefulness of the sound enum. Had I used a string, I'd be prone to misspelling here and needing to remember what string to actually type. But the sound enum not only makes it safe, but also contains autocomplete, so I won't forget what to put here. Another little thing I learned was RequireComponent. Putting this on mono behaviors will make Unity add the required components alongside your one when you drag it onto a game object in the editor. Not only does it save a little bit of time, but I find it also provides a nice little at-a-glance view of what this component actually needs to run. Lastly, I learned a couple of handy things about C#. Firstly, that it has a nice syntax for defining dictionaries inline, such as this. Secondly, C# also has a null conditional operator, which is super handy. Coming from Java, the nullability handling isn't great, and it can be often quite verbose to handle each time. But being able to do a simple nullability check with effectively 2 characters is pretty great. I'll have to leave that there for this time. I've learned a ton of other things, including coming up with what I think are some pretty nice patterns, but going into them in this video would take too long, perhaps in a future video. So what's next? I think I'll spend a few more hours polishing some aspects of the Tetris clone, including making sure that the scoring function is balanced across difficulties, but I don't want to linger too much longer on this. I mentioned in the last video that I've constructed a pathway for myself, including constructing a series of games clones, but before I move on to the next one, I think I'll take a little bit of a detour and make a little tech clone of the movement in Tribes, including the skiing and jetpacking. I'm a massive fan of the movement in Tribes, please bring it back high-res, so it should be pretty fun to try and recreate that in Unity. I'll definitely make a video of that in the future, so keep an eye out for it. That's all for this time. Please remember to like the video if you found it interesting or insightful, and subscribe for future content. Also feel free to follow me over on Twitter, where I'll post random game dev stuff and what I'm working on. I mentioned in my very first video a few weeks back that I'd like to make these weekly, but that was before I realized just how long they took. I want to focus most of my spare time on actually doing game dev, so I won't make any promises around a schedule, but I'll definitely try to put stuff out now and again. Thanks again for watching, and have a great week.